My name is Morgan Linton, and welcome to the 7-part series in domaining. Well, in this first lesson, what I'm going to cover is what is domaining, or domain investing. And for those of you that are already familiar with domaining or already existing domainers, you might want to skip ahead to lesson 2. Also, for those of you who don't know me, I am the owner of the popular blog domainflipblog.com, where I discuss ways that new and existing domainers can help increase the value of their own domain investments through monetization and development techniques. And I use a lot of the ideas that I use in my own flips to help educate my own readers in how they can make a really great profit on their existing domain portfolio. I have also written a book called Domain Flipping, How to Profit from the Domain Name Boom, that is currently enjoying its run in its second year as one of the best-selling domain books online. So, now to get started for the course. Essentially, in this first lesson, what I really want to cover is what is domaining. And there are many different terms of domain flipping, or domain monetization, or domain selling, but all I'm going to talk about in this lesson is the general category of domaining, and the best way to think of this is as domain investing. Now, for those of you that are familiar with real estate investing, there are a lot of similarities, and you'll notice a lot of times in this entire series, I'll compare domain investing and real estate investing, and that's really because real estate investing is domain investing's closest analog. When you flip a house and you flip a domain name, there are a lot of similarities. When you invest in a house and you invest in a domain name, there are also a lot of similarities. So, what is this term domaining? What does this mean? Well, domaining is defined as the buying, the selling, the development, or the monetization of internet domain names. Now, those are really 4 different distinct things, and there may be people that have other definitions, but this is the general definition you'll find online. Well, buying a domain name, that simply means purchasing a domain, either by registering it, buying it from another user, or buying it through a listing service like Sado or Afternic or Snapnames. Selling a domain, well, this means actually selling an internet domain name. Now, a domainer or a domain investor would like to sell a domain for more money than they paid for it, just as a real estate investor would like to sell a house for more than they paid for it. One of the big differences between real estate investing and domain investing is that with real estate investing, you're oftentimes trying to sell the house for a 20%, 30%, maybe even 40% return on your investment. It's very rare that you're going to sell your house and make double your money. Well, in domain investing, if you only double your money, then you are failing at actually growing that domain investment. Most domain investments that we make and the professional domain investors make will oftentimes make 10 or more times their initial investment, and that's a huge difference. Now, another thing to realize is that a lot of these are smaller investments. So when you're buying a house, spending $200,000, that is a pretty reasonable amount to expect to spend, and on the low end in most major markets. Whereas for a domain name, $200,000 would be a lot to spend, $2,000 might be a bit more reasonable. So when we're talking about growing investments at a 10x or a 20x pace, please remember that these are on smaller numbers. You're not making millions of dollars at every sale, but it's not out of the question to make tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars with every sale if you have good domain names and you know how to grow those investments the right way. So when you're selling a domain name, there's a few places you can sell. There's Sado, Afternic, and Snapnames if you want to go through a listing service. And this is similar to selling a car online. You essentially put all the information in about your domain, and then interested buyers that are looking for domains in that category can find you through a listing service. You can also sell your domains through a forum like DN Forum or NamePros. These are very popular domaining forums where domainers are out talking to each other and looking for good deals. The one thing to realize is that they're looking for good deals. If you're going to sell a domain through a forum, you'll oftentimes find that you're giving it away for the lowest price. This is almost like sending your car to auction. You're not going to get the highest price possible. If you sell through a listing service or through a private sale, that's usually where people get the most bang for their buck when developing and selling a domain name. So now I've covered buying and selling. Well, next is developing. When you're domaining, you're also developing a domain name, and this is where investors also get their hands dirty in the same way that domain flippers do. Well, if you've watched any shows about domain flipping, one thing you'll notice is what the flipper does is they go in and pick out all the different things they want to change in the house, and oftentimes they get their hands dirty and do some of the grunt work themselves. Well, the same is true of domaining or domain investing, because when you have a domain name and you want to increase the value of that domain, well, what you really want to do is increase the number of visitors that are coming to the domain and increase the amount of revenue that domain makes. Those two metrics, visitors and revenue, are the key to getting top dollar for your domain name. If your domain, you think, is the best name in the world, but it only makes $2 a month and only gets 200 visitors a month, that's not necessarily a successful domain. You may have a domain that you hate the name of the domain and you don't think it sounds catchy or interesting to anyone, but the domain makes $1,000 a month. And those types of statistics, specifically based around revenue or visitors, are what allow a domain to sell for a very high price. The key to that is development. And that's the same thing you do when you flip a house. You speculate, okay, well, if I add this bathroom, if I add this upgrade to the kitchen, if I add a back deck, if I put speakers throughout the house, how does that increase the value of my home when I go to sell it? And the same is true of domain investing. Well, if I make a website and I add a members area, and I add a discussion section, and I add an area where members can upload and download files or exchange pictures, all those features that you add on are things that you're expecting will increase the resale value of the domain. The nice thing is that unlike a house flip, when you are flipping a domain name or developing a domain name, whatever you want to call it, you are actually generating revenue at the same time. Because while people are visiting your website and clicking on links or downloading or buying products, they're generating revenue for you. And the great thing is, the more revenue you make, the higher the value you can sell your domain for. And that really leads into the fourth criteria of domaining, which really is monetization. And this is not just developing a website, but developing a website that has a tool to monetize your traffic. Whether it's Google AdSense, so that when a user comes to your site and they're reading information, they can click on a link on the side to get more information, and in that way you're serving as a portal for them, but you're also being paid when they click on that link, to also selling things like Amazon content. You can sell books, videos, DVDs, everything directly through Amazon and provide visitors to your website with information that they may be looking for. Another way to monetize also is by selling banner ads, and this is very popular if your domain receives a lot of traffic. Suppose you have a domain that receives type-in traffic, which means that somebody just types it directly in to their URL bar at the top. Well, if that's how you're getting most of your traffic, that means you have a very targeted customer. You know exactly what your customer is looking for. You may be able to find advertisers that want to put their ad on your page, and this is another way that you monetize a domain name. And that's domaining. And that's looking at each of the different categories that are involved, but it's really all those steps that are involved, which is actually buying a domain name and developing it, adding on monetization so that you can actually have a domain that gets a lot of visitors, ranks well in search engines, and generates a good revenue, and then in the end, selling your domain name. Now, through this 7-part course, I'm going to go through every single step in this process and explain exactly how you do this. And I'm going to try to make this as accessible as possible to as broad a user range. Now, of course, if you have experience with HTML and Photoshop, you'll have an edge, but you don't need those tools to be successful in domaining right now. In fact, if you're a reasonably good writer, since content is king at the end of the day, and you'll see why later on in this series, you have a great chance at building up a very valuable domain portfolio. So that's the end of the first lesson. Thanks for listening. And if you'd like to check out some more tips and tricks, please check out my book at www.dnflipping.com. Once again, that's www.dnflipping.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in part 2.